Would both Margot and Peter agree with that?
Well, I agree with it, but I think the whole thing is you're starting with the economics rather than the politics. I think what the current government is engaging is a brilliant piece of triangulation. If you can get attacked by the bishops, and if you can get attacked by Ed Miliband, then you will actually look as if you're Conservative, when they're not. And there will be very little result from this much touted reform, because it doesn't, as I say, tackle the fundamental problem that we have created an enormous and growing dependent class about which no one proposes to do anything. So it has to go down to real politics. The real politics in this country are actually the politics of the family, because the fundamental... I lived in the Soviet Union for 2 years, and the thing that I noticed about it, the thing that I learnt most about what Marxism was really about there, was that the Soviet Union was the absolutely virulent, furious enemy of the married family. It hated marriage above all other things and tried to diminish it and reduce it to a tiny corner in society, because it was the principal rival to the power of the state. And when I got back here, I saw exactly the same process taking place in slow motion in my own country. And ever since the 1960s, and particularly the bizarre divorce reforms which were enacted then, which made it easier to get a divorce and to get out of a car leasing agreement, we have had the most fantastic concerted state-sponsored attack on the family, which continues to this day and is very, very expensive.
Do you recognise this at all, Margaret?
Can I go back to what Douglas was saying? Because the very fact that we've got this major debate about whether families on benefits should receive as much as a working family is a sort of statement of the terrible past to which we have come. I mean, it should be so self-evident that benefits are there to support people in need, and they shouldn't be commensurate with the average earnings of a family who work. It seems to me so self-evident that it's deeply shocking that it should cause such controversy.
Absolutely.
And also I think that it does have a tremendous moral purpose, and I would completely contest what Peter has just said. How he can describe Ian Duncan Smith as not a Conservative baffles me. These proposals brought out by Ian Duncan Smith had their origin in all his work in the Centre for Social Justice that he founded, to try and support families, to try and bring a moral purpose to the welfare state and make work pay. Yeah. That seems to me to encompass everything that the Conservative Party is about, and I feel that it is Peter who is really
I think we've gone as far on this one as we probably can.
Well, I would just say that poor old Ian Duncan Smith was thoroughly cured of conservatism when he was the victim of that tremendous putsch against him, which destroyed the last vestiges of conservatism in the Conservative Party. One of the most astonishing events in British history, and one of the least covered, and as dramatic as the putsch in the Labour Party, which destroyed old Labour and replaced it with Blairism. Fascinating events, far more interesting than any general election of the past 20 years. Not actually much examined, but Ian is not likely to recover from that experience in a short time. But in any case, he's in a party which isn't conservative or capable of conservatism. And I'll challenge you, in 5 or 6 years' time, come back and see, after your supposed grandiose reforms have gone through, come back and see if all the things that you now allege against the welfare system aren't actually still going on. I bet they are.
As I say, I think we're not going to come to a kind of easy consensus on this one. I just have an instinct for this thing after doing the programme for a while. I'd like to move on to two other... very difficult areas in conservative thinking at the moment. One, it might seem small, wind farms, where you have, on the one hand, a great deal of pressure from the EU, from the government, from people who are particularly worried about the effects of man-made climate change, to get more and more and more wind farms across. And on the other hand, you've got a sort of rebellion from what could be called, if I can use his name without him being here, sort of Roger Scruton, small green conservatism, traditionalism, rural conservatism, who said that we don't have much of Green England or Green Britain left these days, and this is a wanton sort of urban attack on it.
Well, I was asked by the Conservative Women's Organisation, which is a very traditional wing of the party, or was at the time, 6 or 7 years ago, to go and speak on the greening of the Conservative Party, which was presented at the time as such a new direction for the party. And when I was preparing my talk, I thought, well, it's actually not new at all. I mean, my
asphyxiated huskies all over the place.
My parents were brought me up in the just after the war, and it was waste not, want not. A stitch in time serves 9. You'd never dream of leaving the house without turning the lights off. These are the whole philosophy is not new, but I think that the trouble with the wind farm issue is that it is seen as too much, too quick, and how a big question over its efficacy. Should we not be looking more at offshore wind? Should we not be looking more at marine energy and also conservation? And of course the protection of the countryside.
Of course, for a lot of Conservatives, they've been late into this debate, I think for a very clear reason, which is that the green issue, the green agenda, as it were, was seen rightly by many of them to have been hijacked by so-called watermelons, people who were green on the outside but very red on the inside. And to an extent, this scared a lot of Conservatives off dealing with that issue.
But wrongly.
Wrongly. But plus the fact that many watermelons were sort of attacking conservative institutions and conservative ideas, and a lot of Conservatives thought, well, in that case, we must defend, the oil companies, or we must defend, and came up with it. Actually, they ended up on very weak terrain. I think that the Conservative policy here can be defined, apart from anything else, in opposition to what one might call Prescottism, which is the idea that in order to satisfy our future energy needs, we must build over the last remaining bits of Britain that are worth looking at, and say that we need in perpetuity so much energy that we'll no longer have any green land that we'd want to look at. I think that the Scrutonian vision of this, that actually green conservatism comes from the local community, it comes from individuals, it doesn't rely on big government for solutions, it relies on itself, is a very worthwhile one.
This leads to something that isn't talked about very much at all, which is the relationship between conservatism and consumerism. Is it possible to have proper conservatism in a rampantly consumerist economy?
No, I don't think it is. I think conservatism would restrain that, as it would restrain an awful lot of other things if we actually had...
Thomas Frank.
Well, no. If in America, anyways, where the guiding principle of conservatism, as we've been talking about, is markets. Right? There's absolutely nothing you can do about these things, or very little that you can do about these things. And here we get back to Newt Gingrich's word elitist. Okay, to have the kind of policies that you're describing would be antithetical to conservatism in America, because these are acts of elitism by necessity, because they militate against the market.
Does America not nonetheless have a much stronger network of faith-based, community-based, charitable and local action, which in some ways acts as a brake on the more extreme aspects of consumerism?
I wouldn't know whether it's stronger or weaker here. I would say that consumerism in the sort of traditional sense of shopping malls and TV commercials and whatnot is very powerful in the United States. You even have sort of green consumerism. So you have, if you take a couple steps back, many years ago.
But real family incomes haven't grown, have they?
What, in the last couple of years?
Yeah, average family incomes.
No, of course not.
Or since the 70s, actually.
And that's right. And sort of blue-collar incomes haven't grown in a very long time. That's exactly correct. One of the sort of fascinating things about America, and I'm sure the same thing is the case here, is the way in which consumer society has sort of grabbed hold of and captured certain critiques of itself. Okay, so you're talking about various environmental issues, and we of course have green consumerism in America. But also, I keep all these issues that you're talking about, Peter Hitchens, of the family and all the ways in which tradition are just is just so massively insulted all the time. In America, it's not the political system that does that. It's the culture. It's the mass culture. It's the consumer culture.
Well, the political system has played its part.
But you just turn on the TV and it's just a slap in the face,
Sure, yes, and I don't disagree with any of that. I hate television. I wish it had never been invented. I'm always amazed at the way that conservatives are not as suspicious of television or motor cars, all kinds of other destructive forces as they used to be. I ride a bicycle for conservative reasons, not because I want to please some idiot warmist who thinks we're all going to be drowned by melting ice caps, which is a fantasy. But because I actually think that it's a good thing to do for myself, and I would recommend it to other people. And that's the way that a conservative environmentalist would seem to me to operate, rather than peppering the country with windmills which don't even work when it's cold.
I think there is a huge tension between consumerism and the market and conservatism, and I think it's something we wrestle with, particularly with regard to town centres at the moment, and the drive to out-of-town supermarket shopping and all of that tension. But can I just make one point about the way I think that we can harness the power of markets to deliver social ends? We've got social investment bonds as a new concept, and there's an example of, I think it's in Peterborough, where there's a prison and it's being run by the private sector now, and there's investors are investing in that prison's effectiveness by buying bonds and raising capital.
You could do this for schools and
yes,
hospitals.
raising capital. But can I just finish, Peter? Because raising capital to fund the sort of offender behaviour programmes to rehabilitate people, and in times of such straitened public finances, the prison's budget is very limited. Why not bring in private capital from people who want to do some good with their investment?
Because the punishment of wrongdoers is a moral activity, not a commercial occupation. The two seem to me to be utterly distinct.
But it is not.
You could not conceivably confuse the two, and I can't see how a conservative could not be repelled by the idea that you could farm out for jobs.
Absolutely. There are very few things that the state alone can or should do. One of them is to raise an army, one of them is to provide a police force, one of them is to provide prisons. The idea that private sector should be brought in to run prisons so that the government can look after all the really important things like building out welfare strikes me as being a crazy inversion.
It's all over the place, privatization of prisons.
Absolutely. They sit there out on the plains hoping for more crime.
Yeah, exactly. They have a vested interest.
They don't work very well, and everyone can leave anytime they want.
I think we should hang fire and see how much more effective they are at delivering rehabilitated offenders, and does it cut the recidivist rate?
Yes.
And the early signs are that it will, and we should hang fire before we make these.
Do you want to hear a funny story?
So Blairite.
No, Andy.